What's this? Me getting the take right? More likely than you think. Welcome to a video that is totally not late. Don't look at the date. One key point. I looked at the last video and I forgot to edit it in, but I'm actually just going to put the picture of the map right here, beginning and during location times of videos. So not only is it not mirrored, but it's also able to see because light was reflecting on the pencil. Wow, genius. But on to what this video is really about. The god of suns. Yes, that's right. Suns. There's two of them. Two suns. Not two gods. Two suns. No, I don't know the physics of that. They're not burning alive, I swear. I just like multiple celestial beings. So let's talk about the god of suns. Yilan is their name. The origins, or like the meanings of the word, comes from yit, which means yellow, and lunyo, which means warmth, and first iwada. And the pronouns are a bit odd, a bit different, you could say, from what we've been seeing the trend of. You'll notice that Ylan uses binary pronouns along with a set of neos. This is because her reign continued into modern day, where the rise of binary pronouns became a bit more popular, and as the culture of using neopronouns as titles fell out, and you just used neopronouns as more of a expression of gender. So their pronouns are she, they, and nov. I will still be putting neopronouns here, even if I don't use the neopronouns as often in this video, if at all, because sometimes I'm bad at remembering things. But now that we have that cleared, let's talk about how they look. So, if you remember, a few weeks ago, if you even saw the video, we had the god of life, whose hair was orange from the sun the warmth being absorbed into Kira's hair. Well, you'll see that Yilan's hair, it's completely stripped white, and that's because from what the people in Igariana saw was when they left things out in the period when the sun was out, a lot of it would become bleached. So they think that because the hair was the most prominent feature besides the ears of Yilan, they would think that the hair would have been bleached, and her skin tone is of a yellowish hue, which reflects on how they viewed the color of the sun to be, because the sun wasn't really out a lot, so they only had so much time to study how these suns look. Also, big fish-like ears, and this was because the people who lived in Yorgana were more of the people who worked with the lagoon. A bit more on that in a few minutes. And were just more connected to that sea part of their old home. So when they started interacting with Yilan, they thought of them to have big fish-like ears, or at least ears that they saw associated with the aquatic creatures of their old civilization. Also got those light blue eyes, in the sky of when it's a cloudless day. There are a few patches of skin that are also bleached. That was just their thinking that again, the sun's just bleached out some of the color. Bit different. And that's basically the reason. bit different reason of a god that will be coming up in like 2 or 3 videos, as you'll see. And the prompted accessory associated with the sun was the choker, the golden choker, which was mostly to symbolize the roundness that they associated with like the suns, and of course the color. So, who brought up Ylan? Well, I need to stop saying country, because these are cities. Don't know why I've ever said country of origin. These are cities, or little city-states. No, city-states are also territories. But these are like cities, and you'll see that on the dot on the map. But Yilan comes from Igarnia, which is the closest civilization to the Sunny Lagoon. Google won't give me a straight answer of what a lagoon is, so the location of the lagoon might go a bit up north if I ever figure it out, because some definitions say it's just a body of water that breaks up the sea. I don't know. But right now I'm just using lagoon as a placeholder for a warm body of water in kind of like a swamp area. It's kind of just like a swampy area. But I digress. Ergania is to the east of Irigana. Some key characteristics of this place. It's a hill. It's not a hill. It's a plateau, which is how they were saved by the tsunami, flooding. It's not tsunami. Tsunami is ocean. By the flooding, they moved upwards into a plateau. So not only were they not locked in, but they were able to see the water rise. This plateau has very fertile land. Hopefully plateaus can have fertile land. But because of like where it is, and kind of like the location, how high up it is, I don't know how cloud works, but we're going to say it's cloudy. It's a very cloudy area. This place is a swampish, warm area, so there's a lot of clouds and moisture in this place, which leads to a lot of rainfall. Unless you go into the mountain range more down south where Skewer is, then the mountains kind of break up these clouds and don't allow rain as much, besides for certain points of the year. But if you're more down to the base, where the clouds are more or less not disturbed, and you just have all this moisture being condensed, it leads to a lot of rainfall. So, how did a very rainy place near a lake come to worship a thing that they don't see often? Well, this is the background. The Iriganas, like the Skurians, saw that the Sunny Lagoon was going to flood. And like I said in Yilan's video, one group, the Skurians, went up into the mountains, and the Igarias went to the plateau. They just split off. There was two conflicting ideas, and they just split off, both finding their own way to how would I say that, to like avoid a disaster that was making their old place of living uninhabitable again. So they found themselves in a plateau with a wide range of land, and they could watch the waters rise from a safe distance and watch as the lagoon started to grow. The terrain, as I said, has really fertile land, but with the constant harsh rain and the temperature is just not being just right, the plants that they were trying to grow just weren't sticking to this terrain anymore. The roots weren't thick enough. It couldn't grip. Do roots grip? I know how plants work. The plants just couldn't burrow itself into the ground of this. So the crops kept getting washed out. And after a few weeks, naturally, food supplies were running low. And people were just missing the warmth that came from the lake of their old home, because there was some natural heat vents. I think it's called heat vents under this particular lagoon, which is what created all these warm body aquatic creatures. So as you do, as many did in this beginning time of the land, they were hoping for warmth and better crop conditions. And Yilan, surprisingly, took a liking to them, which was surprising to Yilan, because Yilan didn't peg them to be that kind of god. But here we are. Yilan went and saw their dilemma and decided, yeah, this is a good city I want to make my first transaction with. So she dramatically split the clouds to let the light in and gift some fast-growing and strong-leafed plants to sustain them until the rest of the crops could grow. There was no cloud deity, so clouds were kind of these natural occurring things until clouds before and someone to embody the clouds came into existence, and then that was actually a child of Yilan, or at least a lower branch of Yilan. So they could work together to continue to let this civilization, or the people who live in the future, continue to live there. But it worked. Now Igarnias took the plant and started a yearly celebration in Yilan's name to have the ever-raging storm to settle for another 2 months. So that's how Yilan found themselves on our inner lands, and why exactly they decided to choose a very rainy place to give their favor to. And now she's still prominently worshipped into modern day by the modern people. Well, she does take a backseat to the god of storms and the god of vegetables. The people of Igarnia give them regular offerings. It's different from what you'll see from the other Council of Ancients, because while the other ancients were able to either just there to lend a helping hand to let the city grow to what they viewed to be their full potential, Yilan was essential to keeping the peoples alive, even after having storms and vegetables come about, because the stars of vegetable, you can't have the vegetables grown in these storms. So that's why she's still a prominent figure. And the influence was seen actually a lot more promptly in more poor weather towns than in places that are more dry. And that's mostly because the poor weather areas they also needed help getting through these seasons of just constant rain if they didn't have the proper plants yet, or didn't know how to cultivate the plants around them properly, or didn't, they're going to need a time of silence, which is what Ylan offers. But as ancients do, none of the Council of Ancients are the popular god among any of the modern peoples. So while it could be a cult following, some would like to say, she's definitely the most popular of the Council of Ancients. But the decline in popularity and becoming more of a secondary god gives her the freedom to travel with Yilan while fulfilling their duties. And you might be wondering, or you might not, because what was the vegetable that she gifted to the Igranias? The Igranias. Well, she didn't name it. It was actually a misconception because she sent her pet named Gracie, to deliver the vegetables. And when they saw the name, they thought that was the name of the name of her pet was the name of the vegetables, and they started naming the vegetables Gracie, which has led to very humorous sayings within the town or in bordering places. And it became kind of a way of, like, you'd call something a Gracie if you wildly misconceptualize something. But a Gracie's is still predominantly grown in the outer parts, as it's a high in vitamins and has the roots to survive through the harsh rains. Igarnia didn't have as much trouble building trade routes as they were not isolated, but in a way they found to made it easier to stay connected with Yilan, as even trade routes couldn't help them through the harsh periods of storms. So, let's talk about sacred items, because every god needs the sacred items of what you're going to, and that's where offerings come from. So we have, of course, the Gracie, which is a tall, thin, grass-like plant. The ends are fuzzy, and it's kind of a thin plant, very grass-like, and then at the tips, it's very fuzzy. Not like cattails, I believe it's called. Those are a bit thicker, but kind of like the fluff is more thinner, and it's white. I'll get drawing skills eventually. I can draw that. But tall, thin, fluff is the basic characteristics of a Gracie. Now, what is the creature that's a sacred item? Also, her pet. It's a Aphila furred badger. Yes, badger. Now, this is creature, no one knows where this creature's come from, and they can't seem to trace the origin back to their own world, and seems to have its own evolutionary course. It's black and white creature, and it has Aphila flowers growing in circular pattern around their head. So, how I'd say, even if, just say we're not in this world, and we talk like we're in our world, it's a badger with a flower crown. It's cute. The Aphelia flowers do have purposes to this version of the badger. It's, how would I explain this? kind of want to say it stores the water so it can survive longer in drier areas and hotter areas. Kind of like a camel's hump, like what camel humps are used for. Even though, even if Yilan is not seen in drier areas, her natural residence in the outer lands is in a higher up place with drier tendencies because of how the two suns are prominently there. That she feeds off that energy. So the closer she is to the two suns in her homeland, the more energy she has to help out in the inner lands. So she's in a more desert-like area in the outer lands. Yeah, outer lands. So the badger survives by having the philia store like the water in the stems. It's not stems. It's like where you get pollen from. Yeah, well, the place where pollen is usually stored, and I can actually probably draw that easier. But I want to also make a side note because all my stories are in a connected universe. Yes, this is a badger that randomly fell in. As I draw out the map, I will be noting some ruins, some portal-like ruins. Then those are usually gateways, and it won't be important to the story. Or at least those stories I'm writing right now. Maybe I haven't quite figured out if I want to make that an element yet. That's how it's how this world finds their way out into the parallel worlds or just a distant world. In our world, became a bit too close and the badger fell in. And Yilan saw this random creature and said, "Yes, I will make this my pet." And then because of the different laws of reality in this place, the badger went through some mutations to accommodate there, and the descendants, because that's how genetics works, evolution. Eventually, with a bit of help with like the surroundings and our natural evolution, we get Ophelia furred badgers. Cool. Moving on. Her sacred color is white, and the season that she mostly pops up in is called sunspeak, which is the sun when it's the season when the suns dominate the sky. Usually, this season is not only shown to the iguanas as a time with prominent sun, but also the only time they see the two suns like really close together. This is because the two suns aren't like on the same. You've seen a solar system. It's kind of like the two circles. The suns aren't on the same circle. They're actually distant from each other, and occasionally, once a year, they will cross and be like in the same point. And that's and then at one point for like 3 days, they can be seen as only one thing, and then they go back to circling different ways. This is how they kind of track time for years. I will figure out the logistics of that. I kind of need to map it out, but the two suns and the moons, which are also multiple, which we'll talk about in a different episode, is what they based on the calendars, just like how we base our calendar on the sun. And finally, T is like her sacred drink. There's not a particular kind of tea. There was during the ancient times, during ancient people's times, it was the tea made of Gracie. And so, but now that it came to modern time and there was a bunch of teas, and Yilan was kind of like, yeah, I will try different teas. The more casual worshippers kind of just lay out any tea they kind of have on hand with intention for Yilan, and Yilan just accepts it. But if you're like a priest or a person who devotes yourself to specifically Yilan and no other god, then you would give Gracie tea, because that's how the proper ritual goes. So the 3 offerings that came during the ancient ones were particularly paintings, usually of her and Gracie Eos. I should explain what Gracie Eos, where that name came up. I'll talk about that during the temple. A song from the script of Yutun, which is sun, which means sun, and Iwada, yeah. And Gracie tea. You offer Gracie tea. And there's a whole ritual that comes with it. And now, the temple. In our last subject of today, which I just realized I forgot to give a table of contents at the beginning of this video, but we're 26 minutes in, so I'll just edit it in. What's her temple? Well, Novs temple, it is a big dome-shaped building that the outside of the walls seem to have been painted, but along have been bleached and washed away. I kind of got the inspiration from how Greek temples have, through like some testing, have been thought to like been painted like dark blues, and I think some oranges too. But between sea, water, and the sun, now we get our classic white buildings. So I thought that was cool, and I incorporated that. So it's dome. The roof is a dome, and then kind of falls out. Should not use both of my hands. The roof's a dome, kind of falls out like this for the walls, and it's like completely white outside, because the paint didn't stick between the rains and the sun. And the temple resides in the middle of where the original town was, and was standing taller than any of the other buildings that of the ancient time. Of course, there's now, in the modern times, there's way bigger buildings, and the city kind of worked its way out throughout the years, but it was originally the central point. So and it's also the point where the clouds originally parted. So they will always know that above this temple is where our suns are going to be. And if the clouds start to thin above that roof, you know that planting season was coming soon. Well, for the inside, the walls are lined with candles, which was a later addition because they didn't have candles during the ancient times. And the walls were painted in yellows, reds, and oranges. On the wall facing the doorway, there is a figure drawing of Yilan and Gracie Eos. In front of that wall is a grand altar decorated in different flowers throughout the year. Whichever flower, these flowers are usually chosen by the most prominent one that grew during that month, and this kind usually cycles through because flowers, I don't know, react differently with the environment during the year, because nature? I'm going to go with nature, even though I had a reason that I'm blanking on how to explain it. Like, I want to say that the rains are different throughout the years, but like with the suns slowly making changing position throughout the sky, it kind of warms that area, so the water kind of gets a bit different in like temperature wise. So different flowers grow differently in different temperatures of water. It's kind of like the explanation I was thinking. Didn't really explain it well. But also, I'd like to always note that the physics of this world isn't really like ours. So, if anything's wrong, I can just kind of throw out that this is a high fantasy world. But that feels cheap. So we're not going to do that. Moving on. So it's decorated with different flowers throughout the year, and in the middle there's a first written version of the script of Yutun. It's safely guarded from the rain, so even in modern time, even though Yilan became a secondary god, they still keep the building secure and fix any repairs and make sure that the roof doesn't start leaking and damaging the first script. I lost my place. And in the middle is just 2 rows of benches to sit on during weekly praises. Yeah, a little small for a big group of people. I think there was like 500 people who went to the Dayton mountain range. So you could probably think there's like 300 to 400 people went here because more people wanted to go upwards because they feel like that would have been the better option. But people who were more like, hey, but I want to stick close to our lagoon, we're going to stay here. It was a smaller group, but not by much. But the townspeople rotated in and out on the last day of the week to give thanks and praises. So it's kind of just like you give your prayer, you give your thanks, you spend about 20 minutes there, and you kind of rotate it in and out. And when one person leaves, another one enters. They kind of rotate through this. It may take a few days sometimes, but sometimes people have smaller prayers and thanks to give. Some people have longer. There was never a set amount of time limit. They kind of just went through it, and they had just like a day that started. Yeah. And right before I leave, I think I should clarify what Gracie Eos is. Well, Gracie Eos is the full name of Yilan's badger. Because when the townspeople realized that they called the vegetable Gracie, Daisy? Gracie. Yeah, Gracie. It's like Daisy, but with GR. I'm so good at naming. They decided to add a suffix to it, which is Eos, and it just means unworldly in Iwata, and it just stuck. But you still would get the one passage of, oh, what are you eating, Gracie? The god's pet. But they added that title suffix, mostly because you would refer to sacred animals by their names, never by a pronoun. That was more secluded to more humanoid, the leaders and the peoples, because they don't look quite human. I need to learn to draw so I can depict that properly. But yeah, that is Yilan. Hope it was worth the wait, and I will see you next time. Because of how late it is, I am going to be doing the God of the Moon. God of the Moons, because there's multiple. So I'm going to start working as quickly as that, and I don't know if it's going to be a Sunday at the latest, but if I can get it out before then, that'll be great. But honestly, I think I'm going to stop holding myself to doing higher things before, because I need to figure out a schedule. So thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great week. See ya.